Good evening. Welcome to Investigator News with me and our Ellie Holder and William. And we're ready to do the World War III report. And I'm going to start off, folks, with the 10 people that were shot at near Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. Now, they said chaos erupted near the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade on Wednesday after shots rang out, leaving multiple people wounded. Um, and it's been all over the news today, and I know everybody has looked into everything that's been said about it, and quite a few kids were shot. I think one person died. Now my thing is, when the shots rang out, the crowd attacked the gunmen. Now that's almost unheard of, but people are fed up. um, they are so fed up that they were willing to chase the gunmen down with a gun. They didn't have guns, and knock them to the ground and hold them until the police could. One gentleman even said this morning on the news that he felt like it was 10, 20 minutes, but it was actually only a minute before the cops were there on top of them. Now, the Chiefs players, I believe, some of them were there, went after some of these gunmen too. Uh, so, William, I think it's great because people are getting fed up now. They're starting to stop these gunmen, perpetrators, gangsters. Everybody's getting fed up.
Yeah, when these guys are running and trying to get away and they're amped up with all the adrenaline and stuff, it's like they're like trying to grab a greased pig. It takes more than one person.
Yeah. Now, another thing I found out over the last couple days is the NGOs at the border. Now, you wonder, okay, what are NGOs doing at the border? Well, the NGOs, the politicians and lobbyists, are now, we have found out and uncovered that they are paying their friends, family members, and opening up different organizations that are housing these illegals illegally. And more we're seeing in the news where we're uncovering where, they have this top secret or undisclosed place that they're putting illegal migrants. And it's because their friends are running these programs and they make a lot of money. So the more they let the illegals in and the migrants in, the more money their friends make. That's why that's why they fight us so much on the border, and why they fight Abbott not to close anything down is because now the NGOs with their programs and their housing that was in Texas is now moving to California and Arizona. They're moving their offices and their the programs and the places that they're housing these illegals. So you can see why they don't want to close the border because they're trying to make money for their friends and family. And William, I can't understand. Um, I'm so used to our presidents and their administration being all American and wanting to support our country, and we've got an administration that just wants to tear our country down.
Well, at the very least, they're feckless.
Yeah.
They're like Wrong Way Feldman or the cowboy that can't shoot straight. I just saw, trying to think of his name, Jake Sullivan, do a little interview or, press gaggle. And they're so far out of their depth.
Yeah. And then, we got Fanni Willis thing that's going on. Karen knows a lot about it, and I told her to type her info down in the comments. Now, I've heard that the judge is going to think on this. I don't think he can even think on it because she got on the stand, from what I understand, and just lied and lied and lied. And then anybody that got on the stand in her defense lied. And, when you lie on the stand after being sworn in, that's a chargeable offense. Now, that's how I take it with the courts.
Well, her friends said that they had been involved all the way back to 2019. And so that's like a 3-year discrepancy.
Yeah, well, I was hearing that she was saying, "Oh, before I hired him, I wasn't having an affair with him." And then her friends even got on the stand. Some of them that were truthful said, "No, it was before." Um, and as I look at this, and on watching a lot of court TV and so much into it, and I asked my court friends today, what happens if if it wasn't this case, if it was a normal case, what would happen? And more than likely, the judge would throw everything out that she has done, which means it could release felons from prison.
Well, it means that they would have to go all the way back to what do they call it when they do discovery? They'd have to go all the way back to a grand jury and start all over again.
Yeah, well, see, my concern is, okay, if they throw Trump's case out, then the problem with it is we're going to have a dozen or more defense lawyers come out and say, you know what, she railroaded us. She railroaded us. And she had this boyfriend, and between the two of them, they railroaded us. And I could see where the judge would have to think on this, because he's got to think, if he drops everything with Trump and doesn't move it to a new DA, that's what I'm thinking he's going to have to do.
Well,
because
who are charged because Trump called the guy in Georgia, right, and said that we need like, what is it, 1,000 more votes or whatever. He was telling them to make sure that all the counting was done right, that there were no slip-ups, right? But they took it to mean something different, that they were trying to collude to just put 1,000 more votes for Trump just by means of being crooked. And if you're a crooked person, that's what you would think first, right?
Yeah.
My
thing though, William, is
if you're an honest person, you would think, okay, I've got to go and make sure that everything gets canvassed and counted correctly, and make sure this thing is completely done right, and then hopefully find some more votes that didn't get counted, and if not, well, that's just where the chips lay, right?
Well, yeah, but if you look at it, the judge's perspective on this, in a court of law. Now, if he decides to put Trump's case into the hands of somebody else, now, is there enough info, or what's fabricated? So, and he has to go on that he doesn't know what's been fabricated, except for the lies on the stand, and that's up to the DA that's going against her to prove. So if we look at what his perspective with the evidence he's got before him, he might just throw Trump's out and then say that, yeah, she's crooked. Well, then that is dealing with other cases that might come up in court, which he can dismiss.
Oh yeah, it'll cause cascade.
So is it easier just to say, I'm going to move Trump over to another court, and I don't got to deal with the rest of this stuff? And by law and by rights, common sense would tell you he would drop everything, because if there's not enough, if he sends it over to a new DA and there's she fabricated a lot and they can look at it, it's got to be dropped, which means but
if they don't, Trump can go and say, well, since 2019. She's been doing this stuff, and how many cases has she folded up?
That's my point, because how many people has she railroaded and fabricated and convicted, and how many has she let go? So this has now created a mess with the whole court system and the DA's office, to where they're now going to have to go back through and look at everything. Now, I heard from one of my court people that works at a DA's office, and she said more than likely the judge needs to throw everything out and let the courts take time and look at these other cases and do right by everybody. Whether it's letting people out or putting people in, this would be the best bet. But she says, we just don't know. And
well, if they don't know, they have to. If they believe that there was a miscarriage of justice, then it's the fruit of the poison apple. They have to let all those cases be set aside and release everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's to a point. Now,
it's really bad for a court.
Now, get this. Now, when that's one thing I asked, I said, what if someone has shot a cop or killed somebody? She said, no, they're not going to let them out. The hardened cases, they'll still keep them in prison. They'll just have to be retried or looked at. And if she didn't do anything with it, it stands. But it's going to have to be put before judges to make that decision. And now, according to what she said,
attorneys have to look at it too.
Yeah,
to see if they have an in to fight the system. But yeah,
and she says pretty much all the DAs and the defense attorneys that they've had like 2 months now to start looking into this, and they haven't filed grievances at this point when she looked into the court records. But there's 2 or 3 of them where someone was falsely accused and they were put in prison for it. So she said just for her district, the city she's in, there's at least 3 that has to be re-looked at by a judge. So they've had months to do this. And if there's only 3 and the judge is looking at this, then, and a lot of the news isn't even talking about this, William. I'm glad we are, because it helps people understand that, what she did was wrong. What she did was crooked. Can she be punished? Yes.
Well, she's saying that she paid back Mr. What's his name here? Nathan Wade, with cash that she kept in her house. And
Yeah.
So there's no like credit cards or checks or anything like that. There's no
But
paper
get
trail.
this, the DA's office is willing to turn over their financial records, but she's not willing to turn over hers, or her records of what she did while she was at the DA's office. So they're going to turn over all the records but what she did.
She said she kept at home at the very least $500 and sometimes up to $15,000 in cash in her safe. Why is she running around with that much cash?
Yeah. I mean, they don't make that much. I mean, they make a good amount, but not enough for her to keep that much cash.
Well, she's an honest person. She can just write a check, drop a credit card.
Oh, yeah, she's
or a debit card. There's no reason to run around with cash. Like, what if she gave him $10,000 worth of cash and he got pulled over?
Yeah. Well, if you have that much cash on you, they think drugs. So they're going to start tearing your car apart for drugs.
That's right.
So,
and here's another thing. Why were they going to Belize and Aruba to work on election interference case?
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused by all that.
Yeah, there's something going. I think she's looking for somewhere she could go for asylum. And she ought to look at Ukraine, because they got political asylum in Ukraine.
I think
Karen, do you have anything to add to this? Because me and Karen talked a little bit on it. If I missed anything, Karen, me and William, let us know, because Karen's been watching it. Speaking of things not right, I watched. This happened a couple months ago, William, and it really concerns me. When they were looking at judges, and they're kind of going through the process of putting certain people in spots. Dick Durbin was in charge of the committee on a day They were looking at, I can't remember who it was. And normally, during these hearings, the Democrats say something, then it's Republicans, and they go back and forth and asking questions or making a statement. Well, what Dick Durbin did is he went to the Democrat, went to another Democrat, got them all done, and said, "Let's have a vote on this."
Oh, he just closed down the hearing, huh?
Yeah, well, they were saying, "No, wait a minute, when do the Republicans get to ask questions?" He said, "No, we're up for the vote." They say, "No." When we have Congress and these committees turn to that, um, that's communist. That's
That's railroad.
that is, they have broken policy and laws. Dick Durbin should be charged, but he wasn't. Now this happened like I think 2 months ago, and I've been waiting to hear something happen to Dick Durbin. Well, nothing's happened. And Dick Durbin is one I seen in Ukraine in 2013.
Well, they believe in doing what they're going to do, even if it violates a law or rule, and then beg for mercy afterwards, because the Republicans will forgive them. And
I can't think of her name. She's an older blonde lady, and she's not letting us go because she says now that they have changed the structure of the committees, and it should be punishable.
Yeah, because when he did that, he violated, what is it, the something house rules.
Yeah,
it's from England.
He did. That's what she was saying, that he totally violated, and he cut her off and said, "No, we're going to a vote." She said, don't we get to say anything?" And see, this is how it's turning out. It used to be they would just say lies and lie and lie and lie and lie and make up false things and get to the vote. Now it's getting to where they're not allowing certain Republicans to even talk. So it's not fair anymore.
It's desperation on their part.
So, all right, I'm gonna move on to this China thing with Lunar New Year gift to Taiwan was an enormous swarm of mysterious balloons, 16 of them crossing the median line of Taiwan Strait since last week. And at least 6 balloons passed directly over the northern and central Taiwan. Half of the balloons supposedly were a type of spying and looking. Now, William, you had more on that than I did. So.
Yeah, so that's not the only thing they've been sending towards the Taiwanese islands. Now, there's the Taiwan Strait, but there's an island that's just, 20 miles, 15 miles from the Chinese shore. And Chinese send out speedboats to try to violate that island. And so what's been happening is the Taiwan Coast Guard the other day intercepted one, and it went to run, and they flipped the boat, and 2 people, I guess, couldn't swim, lost their lives, and the other 2 were fetched out of the water. This is a kind of incident that can just happen at the start of war, right? Yeah. Because you're right on the edge, and so at least China said, okay, it happened. We just want an investigation. Well, they could have said, well, we're not going to do an investigation. We're just going to open up the artillery, start shelling the island.
And at the same time, we had North Korea yesterday fired multiple cruise missiles into the sea. It's the 5th test, they say. Now, they got that, and at the same time, Putin decided to release a statement that he wants to put nuclear power into space. And was it 1967, William, that they made the agreement not to do that? So there was a lot that happened this last couple days. The balloons, North Korea, then Putin.
They've used nuclear ion drives for like Voyager, towards the sun, around Venus, Mars, to photograph.
And you know, this
it.
was
And
only, it's
when
not,
that's
he's going to
done,
do it. He's
when
just,
they're done, they send it to the sun to be, burnt up. But they don't leave it in orbit around. So when it goes in apogee, it actually goes out into space.
yeah. Well, you know, the thing about this, though, William, is he didn't say he was going to. He says he's thinking about it. And see, now everybody's reacting, saying, oh my gosh. And what are we going to do now? It's, we had that 1960s agreement. And so what, adding to what you just said, everybody is preparing for it like he's going to do it. How many times we seen muscle flexes saying, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So
Russia put up in the 80s and early 90s, they put up a satellite that was designed to go around and grab other satellites and take them out. Just physically grab onto them, right?
Huh.
And then pull them into the Earth's orbit so they'll burn up.
Yeah.
And we had to deal with that because we had satellites going from satellite to satellite up there. And I think Russia had a bad experience from that. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but they had some stuff that just mysteriously happened to them.
Yeah.
And so they got a bad taste in their mouth about that. But that's probably why they haven't tried this. And at the very same time, Iran comes out and claims that Antarctica is Iran's.
Yeah.
And these are all on the same day.
Yeah. Now
it's just idiocy.
Yeah, and I think it's just idle threats, and
it's
I
childish.
think, and then when we look at, I think China with its balloons is testing out what we're watching, because how easy is it for them when they sent a balloon over and it went all the way across the states before we took a look at it, and they know that. China's smart. Jinping is smart, and so is.
Well, they want to know where Taiwan's radar installations are.
Yeah.
And those balloons are going to get lit up by those radar installations and send the information back and say, hey, you can't just fly through this space without being picked up on balloon X, right? And they build a map.
Yeah. It's a smart move. I got to say that was a smart move because they found out that it can be done. And so I think that we're going to see a lot more of China doing balloons. I really do. So,
yeah, it's even if their radars get moved all the time, they'll be able to count the radars Taiwan has. Taiwan, if they shoot them down, they're provocative and they got this big neighbor, so they're caught in what do they call that? Perfect quandary, right? If I do the right thing and I bring those balloons down, I risk war with this big bully on my border.
Yeah.
Or I just let them fly by. Do I track them with radar, or do I shut down all my microwave for a period of time?
Yeah.
You have to decide this stuff. Are you just gonna hide whatever you got? Because in the military we have nets and stuff like that. We can hide pretty much anything, and it's hard to see it. And they have the same stuff. So it's an irritation at the very least.
Yeah.
For Taiwan.
And then.
Well, and Taiwan, I told you about the boats, right? The speedboat and the Taiwan Coast Guard, and China lost 2 of its citizens by going out and probing to see if the Taiwan Coast Guard would catch him, and guess what? They did, and then they flipped their boat,
and
2 drowned. China could have said, "Oh, we're going to war over that."
Yeah. See, my thing is,
they wanted
everybody's ignoring what's going on over in Taiwan right now. And China knows it. You know, we're all engulfed in Israel and Ukraine, to where I think China's almost the go-ahead to do what they want, as well as North Korea. Now, did you, by chance, William, and I meant to ask you this on the phone, his sister came out this last week making demands. You remember what that was, or did you see anything on that?
I didn't see what his sister said. I somehow got past that.
Yeah, it was a couple days ago, and I meant to grab it. I think I did, but it was a day that I just couldn't do shows. So you might go, check it out for your show Monday. Find out what his sister's up to.
I know they're very, very frustrated in the DMZ because Taiwan just produced a fifth-generation jet that's an awful lot like our F-35. Yeah. Our F-35 has one engine, and Taiwan put two engines on theirs. You got to fly out over the ocean, right? If one engine goes out, it's better to have two engines.
Yeah.
It's a safety factor. And this is Taiwan's own indigenous aircraft. It's smaller than the F-35, but it's got, a lot of the technology of the F-35. Now, the United States did not transfer. They transferred designs that they could use, right, for making their mechanisms. But we didn't transfer the electronics. And so they've made their own indigenous electronic interdiction radar systems, all that stuff themselves. And, in like 6 years, they've turned out this fabulous little jet. And it looks like it's going to be a great competitor to the F-16 because it fits between the F-16 and the F-15, right, in size. But it's got stealth characteristics like the F-35. I think it's going to be very popular. Singapore is already talking about buying a bunch of them, and they're going into production. That happened this week, and then all this other stuff happened at the same time. I don't think it's coincidental.
Yeah. Now, Mary asked, are we going to be attacked by EMP weapons from space? I don't think so.
No.
I think the whole space thing is just an idle threat. Now,
if you touch off the EMP, if you touch off a neutron bomb, if you touch off a hydrogen bomb, all the other weapons that we have in submarines out around the world are going to take out that country.
And
if our birds start to fly with multiple reentry vehicles, everybody's going to light up the sky.
Yeah.
So it's not worth doing it.
Yeah. And if there was an EMP attack, it would be ground founded or ground. I don't know how the word for it. It would be from the ground on out. And even if a nuclear is used, you're talking the EMP waves.
Right.
A meteor can do the same thing.
Right.
A real big meteor or an asteroid hitting could do an EMP wave.
We had at the Bikini Islands, I think they were 150 miles or 100 miles from Hawaii, and when they touched off their hydrogen bomb, it shut down all the electrical in Hawaii. So it's just because it was line of sight, right? Just 100 miles or so. Well, they can do the same thing above, but not have it just go out across the ocean. They can make it come down, and wherever you could see that blast, it would take out your electronics.
Yeah. And that's something that everybody looks at. But William, I really think this whole EMP is a scare. Because they promote it so strongly here in America that, EMP. But at the same time, we have got solar panels that's dropping our grid quicker than an EMP threat would.
Well, the thing is this, a lot of this stuff are psyops, so they can keep you in a state of fear, and then when you're in a state of fear, you're suggestible.
Yeah.
They suggest, well, maybe you should vote for this person, or maybe you should. This next year is going to be just pure chaos that way. You hear people saying, oh, we're going to have an instant civil war. Then you have other people say, oh, they're going to be fighting on the border.
Yeah.
Why? What in the past has led us to that point? Very little. And it is just fear-mongering.
Yeah. So moving along,
grabbing power. Yeah.
I kind of want to move on because you got a real good thing on Europe. So I want to get through this stuff. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu said Wednesday that hostage talks are going nowhere at this point, despite intense pressure. And even when they all met in with Cairo, with Egyptian and Qatari mediators, and senior U.S. officials were there, that they're not going anywhere. And at this point, Netanyahu says no more. He's not going to go into no agreements. He thinks they're hiding a lot of hostages that may not even be alive. And every time they do get a break, they just get more military equipment or money or whatever it is from
Or they
Iran
transfer people that are
and
locked
Hezbollah.
up that actually will become Hamas fighters as soon as they
Right. So
cross
he
the
says
border.
he's not, there's no more negotiations. He's not going there no more. That this all needs to end. And then when this was mentioned, Hezbollah stepped forward and said, you know what? You may want Hamas to end, Mr. Netanyahu, but once this war ends, then it's us next. And when we're done, then you're going to have to deal with Iran. So they're already pre-knowledge and pre-planning.
Pre-programmed, yeah.
They got a plan. Now
Yeah.
and Netanyahu's got a plan. Now why doesn't the United States have a plan for all of this? It's the whole.
Our plan is to stabilize the world the best we can. That's why we have lily pads all over the world. If we're to leave some of these regions, they'd instantly flare up, and then we'd have again all these refugees fleeing these countries.
Yeah.
It's better just to put lily pads of military. We'll talk about Europe and Aviano was a lily pad in a little while, but yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I see going on
the whole thing with Hezbollah, they're doing these threats and saying, you do Hamas, then Hezbollah would be next. But what people don't realize is, and maybe our viewers do, that Hezbollah has been attacking Iraq and other places for a very long time. So it's not like it's something new.
And not only that, they've been attacking other Arabs. Now, there's Bedouins out there that are Arab but not Muslim. The Bedouins are just people who have flocks and who trade with different towns out in the deserts, right? And they go from oasis to oasis. They have their camel trains. And these people live very, very close to the earth, right?
Yeah.
And just to find their animals, to find a little bit of forage. And when this attack came from Hamas, some of the Jewish people called the Bedouins because they knew that they were fierce, that they would go into a place that was of great threat, because they have to do that all the time out in the desert, because there's still highwaymen out on the desert, right? And yeah, some of these Bedouins came to the rescue of Jewish folks. I heard the story from one of the Bedouin guys, and his car was getting rattled with bullets as he went through to pick up his friend and then escape out with the car. So it's not all Arabs.
Yeah.
And it's not Arabs that are Muslim. This is just Hamas, the neighbors of the Jewish people. Now they say, well, the Jewish people have all the land. Well, that's not really true, because in the beginning, all of Transjordan, way up into, what's the name of the countries at the north? Beirut, up there near Beirut, Lebanon. So
Lebanon, Damascus.
Anyway,
pretty much that's what it is, Beirut, Damascus, and Lebanon.
Levant. That was the Levant they called Transjordan. That was Palestine, right? Israel was just a very small piece of it.
Yeah.
And yet they want that piece, and they're not talking about all the rest of the Levant.
Yeah.
You know, when they talk about ISIL, that's ISIS of the Levant.
You know what? When I was looking into ISIS, ISIS, you know how we had Al Qaeda and Taliban, and they're older guys, and then out of that sprung the new, younger generation of ISIS, because they didn't agree with what the old guys had to say, and then now we're having ISIS. Now we how many years has it been? About 2-3 decades now. So now ISIS is where the Taliban, Al Qaeda was when they first started. So that's where ISIL comes up, where it's that younger generation, and they're worse. They're almost cannibalistic. ISIL's
they are
fierce.
kind of cannibals.
Yeah, they're fierce.
And so Cheryl, have we talked about Sheryl Sandberg yet?
No, but I'm pretty much I'm gonna turn everything over to you. Oh boy, because I'm rough tonight. So you have everything. You know, I did my part, so I'm gonna flip it over and let William take over.
So I'm just going to continue on with this Gaza war. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu says we're going to finish the job, right? Now, his soldiers have been at war now for 3 months. I mean, in contact, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to make very, very sure at this point, because people get used to doing the same thing every day, and they think that they're on top of things, but things start getting out of hand on the front lines. Anybody that goes into war, these are hell situations, right? You have to make decisions that you're going to worry about the rest of your life. They're hell situations, and you can start engaging in atrocities. Anybody, if they've had enough psychological beating from war, can move towards atrocities. Everybody has a breaking point. They have a breaking point of if they're tortured. But they also have a breaking point at which time they mentally break down before they physically break down, and they can get involved pretty easy in atrocities. So my suggestion is to Israel right now is make sure you've got your lieutenants and your majors out there, and ensure that the young guys, you know, a lot of them won't even maturate till they're 29. They won't maturate for another 5 years and get, you know, completely adult. Some of these kids are going to have some serious problems, and the way to keep from having those problems is have really, really good supervision. You know, if you send U.S. Marines out, right, and they kill an officer, their default, as a default, they'll just become more violent.
Yeah.
That's just the default setting. Well, that happens to every warrior, and that's why we always send an officer out with every 30 men or 25 men, because things can quickly get out of hand, and especially if they see the opposition engaging in an atrocity. So it's okay if you do your atrocity to stop that atrocity. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's so brutal. And so my suggestion to Netanyahu is, don't bring your officers back and expect your infantry to be able to just do all this on their own, and just take air support. They have to have very close supervision, especially now.
Yeah.
If they needed some supervision in the beginning, now they need maximum supervision, because they're on the edge. They're dehydrated. They haven't slept well. Sand fleas. It just goes on and on. The horrors that they've been through, and first they psychologically break down, and then they physically break down.
Yeah.
And if there's not somebody out there to catch that before it gets out of hand, then you have 15 or 20 guys one guy will start and the rest of them will just jump in, because they're on the very edge too, and they get involved in that whole crowd thing where it gets tribal when you're out on the battlefield. So yeah, supervision. Fighting somebody like Hamas, this is urban guerrilla warfare.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the ragged edge all the time of an atrocity, just to root these people out. And they've lost thousands now of civilians, but out of 2 million, having a few thousand, that's a lot better than having 1 million hurt. But still, there's collateral damage, and you have people that will stay in their building even though they're told to clear out, because Israel's going to come through with their soldiers and Hamas is going to fight, and they're going to get caught in the crossfire. But they're afraid to leave their apartment with their 1, 2, or 3 kids, and because they're afraid that if they leave and go where the Israelis tell them to go, when they come back, they won't have an apartment anymore. Somebody else will have taken it, because they don't have the clear laws of property rights that we have. It's more like whoever's here first is the owner of it, rather than adjudicated property rights. So they're afraid to leave, any of their dwellings and protection, and if they leave, they're going to be out in the sun. They're going to have even more difficult times maintaining their water supply, because they'll be on the move. Mm-hmm. And that's terrifying. And some people will just stay, and they become collateral damage. And it's a sad. And ISIS knows Hamas knows they're doing this to them.
Mm-hmm.
They know exactly what's happening. And so they set up their fighters and their command structures in places where people actually won't leave, where there's a UN compound, or where there's a hospital. Right now there's a hospital that they've got good intelligence on, and there's a lot of people, Gazans, being treated there. But the information they have is there's hostage bodies there. And so they're trying to set up a deal where they go in, find what's going on in the hospital, get their bodies of their hostages that are dead there. Maybe they'll find some alive. They don't know, until they get there, but they know that there's dead hostages there. And they want to be able to keep the hospital functioning while they do this. They don't want to destroy the hospital because Gaza's running out of medical. Right now, Lebanon has brought in medical tents, doctors, and they're bringing in supplies to the people of Gaza and airdropping it because they have no other way to get supplies to them. And so Jordan gets caught in a pinch with every situation, but King Abdullah has been a very stable, good actor in the region, and he's been good for everybody. He's been good for Israel. He's been good for Gaza. He's been good for Lebanon. I don't know if he's doing it because of pressure from different powerful groups in the world, or if he's doing it just on his own decision. But it's a good thing it's happening, and so the people of Gaza don't feel like they're completely left, to the wolves, because that's what they have to feel like that right now.
Yeah.
Everything that's been built in the last 20 years now is pretty much falling to the ground, and these are steel reinforced concrete buildings. These buildings are built to survive earthquakes and hurricane force winds.
Yeah.
And these structures are taking terrible poundings, and for the most part, they're not going to be able to just be remodeled and repaired. They're going to have to be jackhammered to pieces, crushed up, made into road bed, whatever, and they're going to have to build an entire new society. So that's terrible. Now, we have, Jake Sullivan says he's going to go be talking. He's from the Jake Sullivan is part of the National Security Council, but he wants to go to the Gang of Eight tomorrow and see what's the terrible threat is that they're hearing, right? And people always wonder, who's this Gang of Eight in Congress? So I'm just going to tell you who they are. So they're the two leaders of the two parties, right, in the House and the Senate. So that's four of them. And then there's the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, and the two chairmen of each of those committees, which is going to be a Republican and a Democrat, right? So both parties. So there's four Democrats, four Republicans in this Gang of Eight. And whenever the president or intelligence comes up with things that are extremely terrible, they can't tell Congress because Congress leaks like a sieve. You can't tell them a secret. It just doesn't work. Because it'll just go right straight to the newspapers. Mm-hmm. They use it as leverage. So they use this Gang of Eight, especially when the president comes to them and says, look, we've got this situation where there's an American citizen and he's involved in this terrorism and we can't have him doing this. This is too far out of the lane of society and he needs to be basically culled, right? And we want to send out special forces and if we can grab him up, great. We'll put him in jail, but if we can't, we'll just bring him back in the bag anyway. And they have to go, the president's got to go to the Gang of Eight and tell them what's going on so that there's no failure in the separation of powers because Congress has to let the president go to war. Whether it's war on one person or war on an entire country. So yeah, that's the Gang of Eight is, they have the FISA court. And there's been a bunch of news on FISA too. We're not going to go into that tonight. But it's pretty secretive. The Gang of Eight, they do all their intelligence stuff down in the skiff. Nobody hears anything. Nothing written, nothing recorded. Nothing leaves there but their minds, right? Whatever's stuck between their ears. And apparently Jake Sullivan's a little bit shook. He's shook. I watched him today. He doesn't feel good.
I don't think any of them in this administration feel good. I think they're all starting to realize they're getting caught.
Depth. They're severely out of their depth.
Yeah.
And it's because they don't really know what evil is.
Yeah.
They've lived good lives. They've got good educations. They've had people that are well behaved. They've been able to stand on the shoulders of giants. They've learned lots of things that they're good, educated people that way.
Yeah.
But they just don't understand the raw horror of what people are capable of. And so they don't know to push back in a way that's significant. So it's like this thing with the Houthis, and then you've got ISIS, and then you've got another group out there.
Hezbollah.
All of them are derivatives from the Muslim Brotherhood, right? That came out of Egypt and created people like Saddam Hussein. He was part of the Muslim Brotherhood, became a lawyer in Egypt, and then went to
Islamic
Iraq,
extremists.
to assassinations.
It's the Islamic extremist is what they want to label them as, out of like Saudi and a few Jordan. And
the men have to go to war, right, to protect the country. So they try to get their women and children out of the way. Well, when the women and children cross into another country, there's nobody there to support them. And so they lean on the church. They lean on the madrasas. They lean on education to be able to survive. And that's how we ended up with these terrible Taliban. They started out being Pashtuns that were helping the United States push back Russia. They sent their children and their wives to Pakistan. They got involved in the madrasas. The children came back, and they were more radical than the parents. Parents couldn't hold them back.
Yeah.
And so pretty soon what you had was these kids that had been radicalized in Pakistan rolled back into Afghanistan. They just took over because they were so brutal. They were efficiently brutal. And Americans don't really understand this. And even when Marines and special forces go in and have to deal with these people, they get surprised. It's so brutal. All right, we know that now, so we don't have to keep on that. Fanni Willis, we can go past. So here's something people may not have heard of. Truth Social is going to merge, and they now have approval to merge with another company. And so Trump may have a windfall when Truth Social merges with another company.
Yeah. The other thing, I don't know if I mentioned it, with George Soros taking over 220 radio stations here in the United States. So that's another thing.
They're not all English.
That's right.
A lot of them are Hispanic only channels.
Yeah.
You know, here in my town, We have 4 Hispanic channels and 2 English channels on the radio. But we're out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, yeah, it'd be, 4 against 1 if it's taken over by George Soros. I think he's going to start shutting down any broadcasts that he don't agree with.
Well, the other thing is he's going to use it to propagandize these folks that don't understand really how the United States should be working.
Yeah.
And get them to do things they wouldn't otherwise probably even do.
And the thing is I watch a lot of the YouTube stuff, like in the morning to watch my news, and what I'm finding is a lot of Asians are putting a lot of channels out there, but it's clickbait. That's what I call it. They say that Trump is going to take over, and then you hear nothing about it. But the whole thing is now I bet we're going to start seeing more China, more George Soros and the UN totally eliminating conservative news.
And people have to realize not everything out there is bad. Like I saw at the UN today, they had the Secretary General of Metropol. So it's the World Police Organization. So when Israel has to go into Hamas, there's going to be people that escape from Gaza, right? And in the military term, we just call them squirters. They squirt out the sides. Well, Metropol is tracking these people. They're trying to find out which ones of them are radicalized and are likely to be terrorists, and which ones are just trying, like everybody else, trying to survive. They're not, not naturally evil people or something like that. And that's going on all over the world. That goes on with in the Philippines. They had an insurgence of Islamic insurgents that were tearing up some of the islands there and running drugs, and of course human trafficking and all the terrible stuff that goes along with an insurgency like that. And Metropol had to help the Philippines know who, what, where, and when are moving back and forth between other islands and other island nations, and then coming back, because they were constantly on boats moving around. And then the Philippine people, their intelligence got shared with Metropol, and then other countries like Singapore and Indonesia, their police were able to track these people. And so instead of having to fighting and kill all these people on the battlefield, a lot of them they were able to just arrest at home.
Yeah.
Right? And cool them down. Sometimes it sounds terrible, but sometimes police end up being the only parents some people get. There's no other parental figure for them, and they just learn from hard knocks.
Yeah.
And the people that learn from hard knocks, that's so much better than having shed blood. But it's frustrating to work through that. Okay. Ellie, I think we're out of time.
Okay, do you want to mention, I want to hear a little bit on Europe. I mean, even though it's going to probably take 10, 15 minutes, I really think everybody needs to hear this, because it's coming to the United States, I believe. So go ahead and do the Europe thing.
It's come to the United States by a different path.
Yeah.
So with this, what do they call it? The World Economic
Forum. World Economic Forum.
Yeah, World Economic Forum. So everybody's bought into this climate thing, and
Green New Deal, climate,
Green New Deal, transhumanism. We're going to be our own gods. There's not going to be another god. We'll create our own world. remember when they created the first virus, that was the first living, propagating thing that you could put out in the wild, and it was able to live by itself, just like an amoeba on the ocean, right? Well, they went from thinking that, well, if we can do a virus, why can't we just be God? Why don't we just create our own universe and go into it? And so these people, terrified to die, they want to have their, they want to be transhuman. They want to be able to put all their memories, all their interactions, how they function, how they feel into a computer, and then live there forever and just be maintained by people that are just, just barely able to do it, so they're never going to be under threat. And this is crazy. It's just crazy. And they're using anything and everything that they can use as a lever to get towards this great net org thing that they want to be a part of. So what's happening is they have to reduce the population of the Earth. And one of the ways that they're going to be able to do that is take all the Western industrial societies and bring them down to the level of all the indigenous societies, right? So, like, they want to bring people down to the level of, like, tribesmen in New Guinea. So, all the economies in Europe right now, France, Germany is the biggest economy, England, right? Then you've got part of course, Ukraine's a complete wreck. I don't know how good some places, Italy is a mess. Right now, Italy is afraid it's going to completely break apart, not just because of the economy, but because of the mafia there. Mm-hmm. And they've been killing each other over land and all kinds of crazy stuff. But they're afraid that the entire government of Italy is about to fracture to pieces, and there's not going to be any way to put it back together. It's like, Humpty Dumpty. But because we have an Aviano air base right there, it's a pretty big base there in Italy. Mm-hmm. That's a lily pad. That's a military lily pad. That gives people confidence that everything is not going to go completely crazy, because if it starts getting completely crazy, the Americans are likely to step in.
Yeah.
So we do that all over the world. We do that in Syria. We do that in Iraq. We do it in Jordan. It looks like we're going to have to do it in Gaza pretty soon, right? We've had to go into Lebanon before, and we've lost, we lost the Marines at the barracks there during the Lebanon War, trying to stabilize that. But as these economies come down, so Germany and England and Italy are actually in recessions now. They're not just going through inflation. They've actually made it all the way to recession. And if you look at France, it's about to fracture as well. But there's other countries that are doing very well right now. You've got Switzerland. Now, you have to remember that Switzerland, they had the royal lineage there, that they wanted to bring back all the kings and knights and the whole thing of Europe, right? They want to dominate the planet. They want to be part of they want to be the one world order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. They do.
Poland is doing very well right now. And so Poland feels like they're the axle that's keeping everything together in the northern Baltic area. even though there's high taxes in Denmark, they're doing relatively well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Netherlands, because of this fight over farmland, things could get very ugly. But at this point, they're financially doing okay. However, all of these countries are having problems with people not integrating that come from these Muslim countries. They don't want to integrate. They want the country to change for them. It's like we have a group of folks in New York City, right? And there's a mosque in New York. That's fine. They can have a mosque. The problem is they want the rest of the country to be, they want the United States to be a Muslim country, not a Christian country. And they don't see a problem with that happening. And they can't understand why the Christians just don't turn it over.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It baffles their mind that the Christians aren't just going to turn over the country to them like all these other countries have turned over to them. Like in North Africa and the Congo, and they have an ancient history of countries just letting them in rather than fight and be destroyed because they live so close to the edge as far as being able to survive in the first place. Well, then they come to the United States, they come to Europe, wherever, and these are rich countries. They don't have to bow to them.
Yeah.
Right? They can take a hit once or twice. They're just going to tell them to jump in the lake. And it's just like this thing with Gaza. They cannot understand why they can't control the levers of power. Because they've got all the population in the country rising up. But the leaders won't automatically jump to that tune. They just, it's beyond their reasoning for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a difficulty.
Yeah.
In the first or second generation, it's going to take a lot more time for these folks to integrate because they're still intellectually too close to where they came from. They can't see what's here yet. They're looking at what they've lost still. And it's a terrible quandary. But we have to worry about Europe not being able to produce enough to help out Ukraine. So the United States is going to be pulled down economically, if for no other reason, to rebuild Ukraine, right? Because there's nothing left. They've packaged themselves with that Klaus Schwab group. They're just barely able to survive now. They've got their energy sources. They've food stocks are coming down. They're having hard times just being able to ship things back and forth or manufacture things that they used to manufacture for the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they're losing their standing in the world. But that's okay because it'll get rid of the population eventually, right?
Yeah.
But what they need is the United States as a superpower to get the hell out of their way. And so if they can start something that just slowly bleeds the United States, well, then everybody's on the same page, right? And if they get too close to famine, well, the United States will just do another Marshall Plan, right? They'll come in and save them at the last moment.
Yeah.
We did that to Europe, and Europe knows it, and they remember it.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't forgot that. The United States has forgot about it. The United States has forgot about the candy bombers and the Berlin airlift and the Marshall Plan. And even after we were at a contest with the Soviet Union, we still sent in grain because they lost 7 million from famine.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't sent trainloads of grain in there, it would have just been terrible because Russia had been completely swept out of all their assets in that war, and they couldn't feed themselves after the war. When they're going through the war, they were able to take resources from the communities they came into and they lived off the land as they moved forward. But once they got to the apex of where the Soviet Union would end up being, right? They'd gone as far as they could into Europe. Then when they turned to go back the other way, they were looking at famine.
Yeah.
And the United States came in and not only saved the German people, the English, the French, but also, you know, our former ally, Russia, that was becoming the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And we kept Central Europe from starving to death. We kept people out on the steppes from starving to death. Poland and Romania were big producers of oil back then, and they weren't able to produce enough oil to feed their people anymore because all those refineries, all the machinery had been destroyed, and it was very, very bleak.
And you know, now the farmers are being shut down. The oil and fracking is being shut down, and
with the communism, they were taking all the property from the farmers, and the people who they put back to replace the farmers didn't really care about the land.
They're deciding
they
who.
didn't have generational
Most of the time,
care
it's
of it.
China sending its own Chinese people, the CCP, in to do this. That's where we get the farms close to our own military bases. But the thing is when we talked about Europe, Europe is starving. They're on the brink of collapse at this point.
They're cold in the winters.
Yeah.
People are dying from heat in the summer. They have to live with occasional brownouts, blackouts of electricity. The price of fuel is terrible. I don't know what it is a liter, but I'm sure it's like triple in Europe what it is in like Laos or Singapore.
Yeah.
Their fuel is probably 5 times more cheap than it is in Europe right now. And then you have President Biden made the decision that we weren't going to be a oil-producing nation because of the carbon footprint, and we were sending liquid natural gas from our fracking operations on ships to Spain. Spain had the repository for this liquefied natural gas. That's not as easy to hold like it is for oil, because it has to be kept at a very, very low temperature to stay liquefied. And then they were to pipe that, and the Germans made a system to bring the natural gas into Germany. Well, then here the other day, Biden says we're not going to be shipping LNG anymore. And Europe has just spent, you know, billions building this port, building the holding facility, and then building the pipelines into Germany from Spain.
Yeah.
So, and the aristocracy, they don't care because they have everything they need. And they're always going to have what they need. But it's just the average working guy is suffering. Look what the farmers are doing right now. It makes all these nations fragile. And all it takes is a spark. Hitler came into power because Germany was starving. Germany had no future, and they needed somebody. And there's this radical, crazy kind of guy, but hey, at least he was going in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
And
so they thought.
Pretty soon, right, and then they couldn't get rid of him. And he made their economy good again. He kept his promises. What he didn't do is keep peace in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And Austria, Hitler was from Austria, and Austria were part of the Habsburg lineage of kings and queens of Europe, and they want to be back power. Part of the you probably heard in history called the Holy Roman Empire. That was in Vienna, Austria, and that was a moniker given to them by the Pope. And because of that, because they were called the Holy Roman Empire, the farthest north empire of Christianity into Europe. Okay, that was Vienna. So they had the power of God on their side.
Yeah.
The power from the Pope. And they were able to, they and their families all through Europe were able to rule Europe, and the kings and queens and the earls and the princes, they lived very well, but the people lived a horrible, horrible life.
Mm-hmm.
And this aristocracy lost its Holy Roman Empire basically at the beginning of or at the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been 130 years since then. They want it back. They lost it because it was an accident. They didn't want to start World War II. They just, treaty after treaty, led one country after another into war until everybody was involved in it, and nobody could get out of it. The only ones that wanted war was Germany. And mostly when Germany went into some place, they just threw up their hands and said, "Okay, you're the new policeman on the block. We'll just do what you're doing. Don't tear up the streets. Don't burn down the buildings. Don't rape the women.
Don't tear up the streets." Yeah.
And we'll pay tribute, whatever. Just don't be destructive, right?
Yeah.
We want to keep our nice things. They did that in the Netherlands. They did that in Denmark. They did it everywhere, and they finally did it in Norway. Those countries didn't get destroyed because they just said, "Yep, yeah, okay, you win, whatever. We're not going to help you out, but we're not going to get in your way either. Just whatever, okay." That can happen now as people get more and more on the edge. So you see all these people that are in tents right now. Do you realize some of these people in tents are retired people? Retirees can't afford to live in the United States. If you look down in Mexico, down towards central Mexico, there are lots and lots of American people that are on Social Security. They have to leave. They have to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
There's no place left for them here that they can afford.
Yeah.
They can't afford to keep. They can't afford to keep the payments on a $500,000 home that they bought, in the 70s for $60,000. It's just the taxes are beyond them now, and so it's either the streets or it's an airplane and move someplace where their dollar goes farther.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're losing all of the people that can teach our children, right, how to protect their future and all the good things that's been bequeathed to us, because the people that have that long memory, they have to jump ship now. And we ought to do a study on expats. It's crazy how many people are leaving.
Yeah.
Especially veterans. Anyway, so Europe's becoming more and more fragile. They can't defend themselves because their armies are fat, right? They haven't done the training like they should. They haven't maintained their vehicles. they've done is gone from one socialist crisis to another, trying to patch everything together the best they can just to keep from being overrun by riots. It leaves these countries in a fragile state. And now, so the United States is going to, we're in debt. We're in debt more than the gross domestic product for an entire year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So take everything everybody earns in the United States for a year, and we can't take all of that and pay back that debt.
Yeah.
We would have to do that for 2 years. Everything, our food, our lodging, our heat, I mean, absolutely everything. But if we're smart, we'll superheat our economy, and it will make so many dollars that it will make that debt be small. Because what you do is you become so wealthy that those former dollars, they don't really mean much. You know, you end up being more like the Philippines. They have pesos there, right? And so if you buy a house there or a piece of property there for $40,000, it's like, I don't know, 6.5 million or 4.5 million pesos. It's just valuations change, and if your country becomes richer, those debts become small. If your country becomes poorer, those debts become insurmountable. And so we only have one real choice for survival at this point, and that's to superheat our economy. Well, what is the economy going to do? We're going towards, we've heard Biden use words that Roosevelt used that were almost like Lend-Lease. We're redoing Europe, World War II, point two, right? I mean, yeah, World War II, point two. And I guess what I'm really trying to say is just kind of buckle up, because everything's going to be really, really crazy until this election season's over. And they're going to try to scare the boogers out of you. They're going to try to get you to buy their things and move into a cave and, you know, wrap yourself in saran wrap, whatever it is that they got going for the minute. And I've even heard veterans that are scaring people for no great reason, just to make a buck. And, you know, that's not right. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say is things aren't as bad as they look, but if we're not smart, they'll get out of hand really quick. And the only thing that's keeping us right now on the rails that we are on is the American people not wanting to go all the way to the right or all the way to the left. We're trying to keep this train on the tracks, and it's not the government that's keeping it on the tracks. They want you to think that. It's the average people. It's like the people that had that train accident, right? Where they had all those chemicals, that people still live there, right? Just average people. They're trying to hold their world together. We're all doing it. And we're doing a pretty good job because the government's having a terrible time, you know, knocking the pegs out from underneath us and you know, really terrifying us.
Yeah.
And remember, it's just politics right now. Everything. It's politics is a war without blood. But even though there's not blood, it's still a contact sport. It's tough, right?
Yeah.
It's not knock down, drag out. So this is probably the worst. This is going to be the worst election season that the United States has seen till just before President Lincoln. President Lincoln won the election to be president in a chaos situation like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the president before had done all kinds of crazy, silly things. And when Lincoln got there, all of a sudden, guess what? We had a civil war on our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this president wants to do that.
No.
I think America doesn't want that to happen, right? America's a pretty cohesive group in the center of the nation, and we don't want that to happen. But the coasts are they get a little crazy. I think it's because they're too close to salt water. That's my guess, right?
Mm.
It's a joke, but salt water does it to them. Yeah.
Well, William, is that it for tonight?
I think so. I think things are better than we think they are, but we just have to pay attention and don't let people scare the boogers out of you. I mean, that's really where we are. And we have to, the people that are making this economy fall apart, we have to badmouth these people. They don't get to get away with this, without being badmouthed. That's how the United States protects itself. They want to do a new version of a pandemic, and they've got pandemic acts out there. Well, we all start talking and blabbing about pandemic acts. Pretty soon they can't do it. They can't run their bioweapon because it'd be obvious where it came from. And so we have to do that with other things. We have to do it with the economy. We have to do it with the Fed. We have to do it with the digital dollar. This whole thing of communist teachings for our children. We have to badmouth that. We have to badmouth people who want to euthanize other people. We just have to protect each other. And what we have, our biggest power right now is our voice.
Yeah.
So when you see something going on in Congress that you don't like, you get on the phone. That's our voice right now. You get on the phone and you give them a taste of your mind. Don't be shy, because it's the word of mouth right now, the likelihood of votes that terrify the people into doing the right thing. You know, the government in the United States is not the best institution there is, right? It's not perfect, but it is the best in the world. And what makes us the best in the world is after we do everything wrong, we will finally do the right thing. And the rest of the world will keep doing the wrong thing, and then if the wrong thing doesn't work, they'll just move on to something else. And it's just that little bit. And that little bit comes from people becoming more and more and more aware, and then bad-mouthing the thing that's going on. Our revolution started with people bad-mouthing what's going on. There was this silversmith, right? I think they make Revere wear now. Paul Revere, he started bad-mouthing the British for the taxation, and they started bad-mouthing them in the pubs. They started bad-mouthing them, in the city streets, the big city streets, and pretty soon they didn't want the taxes anymore, and they did something about it. It's the words between people that makes this country strong, because we know what each other's thinking then, and somebody can't co-opt what we believe and what our friends believe. Okay, I'll let you go, Ellie.
Okay.
If you like what we've talked about today, be sure and subscribe, share, give us a piece of your mind in comments. That's great. It could be positive or negative. We'll catch up to them eventually and answer your question, or if it's bad enough, we might ignore you. But probably not. We'll probably mention it. Anyway, thanks, Ellie, for the opportunity to help, and I hope we have some more shows here in the future pretty soon.
So, okay, everyone, like you said, subscribe and like and ring that bell so you're notified when we are on. And like I said, tomorrow will probably be just trivia. So come on back tomorrow night. And we thank you for watching.